Matt, I want to talk a little bit about loneliness, the family, and capitalism, because this is something that I think you and I have been talking to each other about since we met each other, in different aspects of the way that the system that we live under is antithetical to human relationships thriving, and our very nature. And what gets really scary is when these kind of arguments go outside of, I don't know, philosophy classrooms and drunken nights, into actual data that you can look at and see the actual anti-human costs of this system. In a lot of ways, I mean, you and I and our generation, many of our listeners, we're very much like the guinea pigs of this antisocial world that we're living in. Right. Think about the lack of sociability that a lot of people will experience, and then the market solutions that sort of popped up to deal with it. Apps like Tinder, etc., really failed people, and I think there has been a reckoning with the fact that a lot of those apps and programs weren't really designed to foster connection or whatnot with folks, but to keep many, many people on the platform, right? Of course, some folks are better at
Surveillance,
that,
yeah, and
and for
engagement, yeah.
surveillance and for information. But as a social phenomenon, these were not set up to create long lasting love as much as it was to make sure you could get data and subscriptions from folks. And I we'll get back to this loneliness and this problem in dating in a second, because there's another real issue that we're seeing, and it is one that is really frightening, which is that the birth rate across the globe continues to decline. Right. And that's a significant issue, right? There's obviously like freaks who are very obsessed with this, people like Elon Musk, because they have all other kinds of issues going on. But if you look at it, at countries that have aging elderly populations that do not have, young people, growing younger population, it creates a fundamental tension in society because as people get older, the costs and responsibilities for caring for the elderly rise and rise, right? It creates a very, very dangerous situation. And it is something that we are seeing all across the globe, particularly in the Western world, but all across the globe, this real tension, right? Um, and on the show, we've talked about, particularly in America, why things like the birth rate might be plummeting, right? Things like the costs of childcare, the prohibitive costs, and all that is absolutely true. People should read the Damage magazine that we've been highlighting, the interviews that we've done on this as well. But a lot of this talk goes into family choice and preferences versus smaller versus larger families, right? The argument going that people would prefer to have maybe one, two kids now instead of a huge family of like five, six, seven children. Like, my grandmother, for example, had that many kids. And that this is the reason the birth rate is declining in America is because people are choosing to have smaller and smaller family. But that conversation actually very much misses the point, which is that one of the largest factors in the reason that the birth rates are declining all across the globe is not just the costs and the stress and jobs that people are working in. It's that less and less people are in relationships in the first place, and that is something that is on the decline. And I'll pull up this piece in the Financial Times that has some of this information here for people to see, but it's quite alarming. This is we'll just use the graphs here from the relationship recession is going global. A rise in the numbers of single people is becoming a key driver of falling birth rates in the Financial Times. So this first graph here says in the past, birth rates were falling mainly due to couples having fewer children, which you can see there on the left. That dark shade of blue part is the amount of people, the lowering of the birth rate because people are having fewer children. And then if you look on the right, you'll see that lighter blue is actually fewer couples. So you're seeing here that there's a significant increase, particularly in the past 10, 15 years, of less and less people in relationships in the first place, right? Which is a fundamental problem that goes beyond just costs and incentives around having children, protections for mothers, all that kind of stuff. There's just less and less people in a relationship in the first place. And this isn't just in the United States, which is something that I think is really notable. You're seeing relationships across young adults are declining around the world. And in East Asia, Latin America, MENA, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, you're seeing this as well in the Western world. This is a global decline in people who are in relationships in the first place, right? I mean, you realize that all of these kind of individual cultural arguments that people will fall into when they have these kind of conversations become moot when you see that this is something. Look, there are things that aggravate it, right? There's some parts of the world that this is a stronger correlation than others, but it is a general trend that we're seeing all across the globe. Um, and as you see here, we don't need to go into it. People can read the Financial Times piece. The birth rate decline and the amount of people in relationships, there's a high correlation there as well. Um, and this is the thing that's notable, right? Because I already can hear the kind of counter argument that folks are going to get here, which is like, well, it's like, oh, well, this is just like a concern of like the elites, blah, blah, blah. No, no. The people who are in relationships the least now are people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. And it's the poor who are really being sort of pushed out of relationships, which is massive. I mean, this is taking
which is a
away
reversal.
which is which is a fundamental reversal of how most people think about this question. But that means that people who don't have a college degree are finding it harder and harder and harder, to find themselves in a relationship. And we see this at the same time where the WHO, the World Health Organization, declares loneliness a global public health concern. Um, which it absolutely is. And if you can see on this graph as well, feelings of loneliness span the globe in 2023. And you can see just significant numbers for people who are saying, um, feeling significant feelings of loneliness just the day before. Now, we have more to get to in a second, but I wanted to throw to you a little bit here, Matt, because this shows something. I just to make the argument really, really clear here. This shows something that I think is fundamental to global capitalism, right? Wherein the fundamental aspects of being human, sociability, camaraderie, community, having a child, are now under threat by a system that has atomized individuals, right? The social unit, the family unit, the community has been so disrupted by capitalism in our lifetime and before, but as accelerated in the hyper atomized and isolated way that most people experience it right now. And it's not a surprise that all this is happening at the same time when people are saying they're lonelier, that we're also seeing declines in unionization and all this other kind of stuff because there's been a war on the social. And now it has gone so far that it is actually threatening our ability to reproduce ourselves as a species, the system that we live under.
Yeah, it's I mean, everywhere in the world, it's entrepreneurial
Yeah.
spirit is the way to get forward. And what was Elon and Vivek talking about? Oh yeah, we need people willing to work 70, 80 hours
Mhm.
days and living in a shoebox and that sort of thing. But I mean, there's a good piece, and we've talked about this. Maybe we should get this person on in dissent about Andrew Tate, and there's this great paragraph here toward the end. Um, oh yeah,
And Andrew Tate, for
uh,
people who don't know, is like insane, men first influencer who's built a career around denigrating women and
yeah,
promoting like a hyper misogynist worldview.
a manosphere sort of guy.
Yeah.
And um, we should. Oh yeah, sorry, I thought I had this. Oh yeah, in light of this, is worth remembering what other modes of defense were once the norm to this falling into this rut of for young men. Stuart described the old working class cultures of Britain as bulwarks against exploitative bourgeois
Mm.
society. This culture, with its values of cooperation, communalism, and self-sacrifice, rose up as a series of defenses against a dehumanizing economic order. Its everyday solidarity sustained men and women through the terrors of a period of industrialization. Rem Williams, too, noted that the working class solidarity was often a defensive attitude, the natural mentality of the long siege. Solidarity functioned like a street barricade erected in protection, but with the effect of building a community as one. We should ask why this type of defense no longer feels relevant to Americans. And, one answer to that is, I mean, Bill Clinton said, when you hear people talk about the groups that are not letting
Yeah.
Democrats get their policy off, he meant like Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition and Labor, and
Mhm.
Jimmy Carter also. There's some pretty choice quotes about him saying we these uh, basically treating unions as if they were elite special interest group, which is basically something Republicans do. But Democrats were doing it for a while, and so they governed like it. Uh, Bill Clinton delivered for capital at the against labor multiple times, and so of course, like maybe there's some structural things that we're always going to hollow out labor, but there were choices made by the Democratic Party in this country, not to mention like the Republicans, which of course are attacking this sort of solidarity. But yeah, it's not a surprise, really, ultimately, that we have a media system that is entirely set up by capitalists. And there is one type. Look at the way they reacted to Luigi Mangione. That
Mhm.
is terror. And um, there is one real meaning of life that I've seen pretty convincing over the past 100 years. And it is this type of thing that animated people in the Dakotas or the Southern tenant farmers. It is fight against oppression and exploitation of you and what you do for work every day. And that's omitted by all of this. It's not what Mark Zuckerberg and Joe Rogan are talking about. Like, but that's the real actual struggle. And like, so maybe people can go home alone and watch, different videos and entertainment and stuff that's more atomized than it used to be, right? Like we are getting more atomized as a function of certain technologies and stuff like that, and that needs to be counteracted, I think,
No,
affirmatively.
this is exactly right, Matt. It's like these are the fundamental tensions that we're experiencing. Is like there is no barrier between the social and the consumer world, and that wall between those two things, going to the marketplace, right, and being at home, like that wall has been crashed down by this monster, by this machine, and it is, and you have that on top of the fact that more and more people feel pressure to be at work all the time, even if they're not at work. The idea that like, oh, my cell phone, I might have a message from my boss, or I might have something immediate that I need to be doing, right? Losing that is significant, for the experience of home life, the experience of family life, and then the hyper atomization that most people experience, right? Needing to leave home to be able to, like, live in one of these like superstar cities, as they call them, New York, LA, right? Nothing against these places, or Austin, right? Nothing against these places. I'm from one of them, but that means that you now cut yourself away from your family, from your roots and your community, and that creates a lot of loneliness. Then step in this market solution to deal with it, right? Which is Tinder, Meet Cupid, or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
Which, as we've as like scandal after scandal has come out, that these were kind of set up to just spy on you. Um, has created a situation where people are lonely, and they are atomized because they don't have there isn't even a, it's not that, oh, everyone is just watching the TV and they don't realize that there is like this big party going on around them in the public square. There isn't a public square because the
yeah,
public square has been bulldozed over, to become a private place, be it a
yeah.
shop or a store, or or a restaurant or whatnot.
And the truth is, like, I've had some success on dating apps, but I've had better success on, friend to friend and so in social situations. When you have to up and leave and get rid of your like, say goodbye to your community, and okay, I'll catch up with you through Facebook. There's less opportunities for that sort of stuff. You have to
Hmm.
start over. Everyone knows the sort of thing, and everyone knows like the rights response to this. Like Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro is,
Hmm.
oh yeah, move to a town that can hire you, which is
Yeah.
psychopathic. You should be able to support a life where you are,
Hmm.
and of course, opportunity. You chase opportunity, but that you
Well, I mean, I don't want to make too much about the moving thing, because I think that matters. But the big thing, is that in every town, be they the small town, the idyllic small town, right, it also doesn't exist anymore too, because those social spaces have been eradicated, right? You look at loneliness in rural America; it's just as bad, right? This isn't like an urban versus a suburban thing, or an urban versus a rural thing. This is like a fundamental aspect of American capitalism, that people have been uprooted, from their communities, yes, but that's not the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is, even if they stay in their community, social life is on the decline, um, and
yeah.
this has consequences, again, from both romance and making families, to every other aspect of life, being a political organization,
I mean, concerts, music costs so
yeah,
much. Is it any
yeah.
surprise? Like
And they should
that
all go to jail. All of those like those platforms that
yeah.
just inflate the ticket prices. No, I mean it's evil. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this the other day. It's like, when are people just like you see every once in a while that like maybe like the government will do something about it, but just how much of our life needs to be stolen from us by these freaks who are just looking to make a buck. Um, I mean, it sounds like we'll need to do more on this. I wanted to end on this line because one of the things that I think as the left we cannot do is make excuses for the lack of sociability, for the attacks on the family, for the difficulty that people face, and that was the trend, particularly in the 2010s, to sort of promote these ideas of like abolishing the family and all these other kind of things. Which you talk to most people, and it is one of the most alien concepts ever because they're sitting there thinking to themselves, I would love to be able to engage in serious family life. And Dustin Guastella, in the most recent Damage magazine, which I highly suggest, issue number 3, Mothers, was all about the family and mothers. Wrote this in pursuit of the family, and I'll just read this bit here. It's no surprise that families dissolved in the neoliberal era. As Mark Fisher noted in 2010, quote, family ties are unsustainable today. It's not just the stress of, quote, conditions of permanent instability, end quote, make it more difficult for parents to stick together and raise children. It's also that the sociability engendered by those conditions make it difficult to even want families. Quote, the values that family life depends upon, obligation, trustworthiness, commitment, are precisely those which are held to be obsolete in the new capitalism. As Theodore Adorno recognized, thanks to the market, the negation of the family gains the real upper hand. Capitalism needs no help in abolishing families. And I think that's perfectly put, and I think is exactly what we're getting at. And probably need to do more on this, but it's something that I think um, pushing back against the lack of sociability in our world is a very, very important political act, and it has important individual, personal benefits, but also massive social ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, folks, it ain't over. We're going over post game, patreon.com/left reckoning, to hang out with us. We got a few more stories we wanted to get to, and we'll also be taking questions from the Discord. If you've been tuning into the show, you like what we're doing, please do consider supporting it. Helps us out a lot. But you don't just get these post games if that's not your vibe. You also get these Sunday shows, which a lot of y'all seem to be interested in. We've released one of those last weekend that we did a few weeks ago, public to everybody, and y'all really vibed with it. Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Last Sunday, I think, was one of my favorite ones that we've done in a while. We went into the founding of the American Socialist Party, and the early American Social Democratic Party. We talked about Eugene Debs. We talked about populism. We talked about building programs that are mobilizing and exciting to people. One of my personal favorite things to do with you, Matt, is do those kind of in-depth readings that connect theory and history and politics. So you get all that at patreon.com/left reckoning, along with the unique benefit of putting a little smile on our faces.
There you go, folks.
All right, friends.
Patreon.com/left
We'll
reckoning.
be over there in a couple minutes. Come hang out with us.
Peace out.